Welcome to the World Cinema Recap. The film begins with an Oxford University professor demonstrating female hysteria on Eliza Graves before his class. She claims to be normal, but the professor cruelly touches her, causing panic. She goes crazy with human touch. After the demonstration, he asks his aide to bring in another patient. Young Dr. Edward Newgate from Oxford arrives at Stonehurst Asylum on Christmas Eve. Guards and Mickey Finn lead him into the building. 200 people live in the asylum. Most are lords and ladies of Britain's finest families. Dr. Edward wants clinical experience for his medical career. He encounters asylum superintendent Dr. Silas Lamb. Edward's dedication to the mentally sick impresses Dr. Lamb. Dr. Lamb invites Edward to afternoon rounds, introduces him to Stonehurst sufferers. Some are insane, some are animals, and some are homosexual. Dr. Edward notices Lady Eliza Graves, the film's opening character. Her feminine hysteria is being treated at an asylum. She is noble and married to a wealthy man. Unfortunately, Lady Eliza is hysterical. She dislikes all physical contact. She bit her abusive husband's ear. She was taken to the asylum by her father. Dr. Edward admires Eliza's music. She seemed charmed by him. Dr. Lamb's unusual treatment surprises Edward. He glorified their state and let them dwell in their delusions instead of mending them. Edward is invited to a staff dinner tonight by Dr. Lamb. The dining table has many etiquette dishes. Patients joining them on the table surprises Edward. Patients benefit from mixing with polite society, says Dr. Lamb. Everyone is having a good time at dinner until Dr. Edward says Mickey Finn is a weird name. Dinner becomes tense. Everyone goes silent, but Mickey Finn laughs madly. He offers Dr. Edward booze. Lady Eliza smacks him with her legs from below the table as he prepares to swallow it. Alcohol is dropped by Dr. Eliza brings him out, claims he's cleaning his shirt, and tells him to flee the asylum immediately. She doesn't explain why. Edward goes to bed confused that night. For future use, he prepares his rifle. A loud noise frightens Edward. Following it, he reaches the basement. Several prisoners ask for his help. His first reaction is that they are insane patients, but after talking to them, he finds they are the asylum personnel and administrator. Lamb was a patient who mutinied. He locked up the staff and let the patients, including Finn, run things. The asylum administrator, Dr. Benjamin Salt, 2 nurses, a health advisor, and others are inmates. They were brought to the basement with a drink and medicines. Edward realizes he would have become like them without Lady Eliza's rescue today. Edward hurries to tell Eliza the truth, terrified. All of it is known to her. She was one of the lunatics who helped Dr. Lamb confine the staff. Lamb takes Edward and Mickey Finn on his afternoon rounds the next day. Edward must change his clothes in a lunatic's chamber. Looking at the crazy is unnerving. The man attacks Edward when he approaches. He almost chokes Edward when he sees Arthur on the wall. Edward calls him Arthur, thinking it's the lunatic's name. Finally, the man relaxes. Dr. Lamb is impressed, but Edward is badly injured. Lady Eliza treats his wounds. Edward tells her he wants to rescue the inmates and flee. She reveals that Stonehurst Asylum was brutal and Dr. Salt experimented on prisoners. His ways and ideals were devilish. Dr. Salt cruelly treated Lamb, Mickey Finn, Eliza, the cooks, and the guards. He touched Eliza inappropriately to induce hysteria in the name of curing her, and he kept some patients under running water for days. Dr. Salt says a patient's deepest fear cures crazy. He hesitated to identify Lamb's deepest fear. Lamb had horrific operations from Dr. Salt. Lamb and other patients hated Dr. Salt and planned for months to escape the torment. One day, they drugged the doctor and staff's water and imprisoned them. Lamb replaced Dr. Salt as asylum chief and let patients live freely. He hired gatekeepers, cooks, and nurses. He gave their lives meaning and made Stonehurst joyful. Edward vows to never suffer again after hearing the story. Edward soon wows the asylum. An elderly woman refused to eat until her son returned from war. Edward pretends to be her son and feeds her. This incident makes Eliza like Edward more. She admires his generosity. The couple falls in love. Eliza doubts Edward's offer to run away with her from the asylum. Soon later, Dr. Lamb calls Edward. Dr. Lamb wants Edward to help him experiment on Dr. Salt. He binds him to the bed. Dr. Lamb asserts that Dr. Salt is a maniac who thinks he's the true superintendent of Stonehurst and needs therapy. This is electrotherapy. Dr. Lamb electrocutes Edward in front of him. Asks Edward to follow suit. Dr. Salt forgets everything after electrotherapy. Tomorrow is 1900. Everyone in Stonehurst is joyful and celebrating. Edward wants to free the captives tonight. Ceremonies occur. Everyone dances as Dr. Lamb watches. Other places, Edward knows Dr. Lamb is good. He searches for it.asa patient. Edward finds a hidden image in Lamb's wall and grabs it.to celebrate the new century. Everyone leaves the building. Edward stays inside to spike the champagne with a drug that knocks everyone out. Mickey Finn captures him. Edward breaks away from Finn after a fierce fight. Everyone receives drugged champagne at the party. Just before they drink it, Mickey Finn interrupts them, catching Edward's trick. A bow from Dr. Lamb hits him. Edward wakes up confined to a hospital bed and transferred to the electrotherapy chamber. Dr. Edward will be electrocuted like salt. Just then, Eliza enters carrying Edward's pocket watch. It depicts Eliza. She thinks her spouse dispatched Edward to rescue her from the asylum. She asks his genuine reason for entering the asylum. He recalls a medical lecture 6 months ago where a doctor showed Eliza's incapacity. Heartbroken at her condition, he resolved to save her from torment. This was Edward's genuine motivation for entering Stonehurst. He asks Eliza to flee the asylum as he is carried away. Edward demands a last will as Dr. Lamb prepares to electrocute him. He wants to offer Eliza Graves his pocket photo. Actually, Edward had found the image in Lamb's chamber. Dr. Lamb is surprised when he sees it. The picture drove him insane. It is discovered that Dr. Lamb was a wartime doctor. He killed his soldier friends to relieve their misery. He shot them all and tried to murder himself. But he ran out of ammo. This eventually drove him nuts. Edward showed him Lamb's soldier friends. Photo. It rekindled his crazy. Dr. Lamb flees. Mickey Finn decides to operate on Edward after seeing this. But Eliza helps Edward. Everyone in the asylum cheers their battle. Finn's touch on her trigger spot sends her into frenzy. Edward soothes her. Reynaldo, at 1. Then, fighting resumes. Final electrocution and burn kill Mickey Finn. But the fire spreads and burns the room. Eliza saves captives from the cellar, while Edward searches for Lamb. He finds him unhinged in the hallway. Edward takes him outdoors with other patients. They're all safe now. Everything ends. Eliza resists Edward's invitation to move in. Edward tells Eliza he has a final secret as they kiss goodbye. Some months afterwards, Stonehurst is better than ever and back to normal. Later, the genuine head nurse cares for patients like Salt and Lamb. The Oxford professor from the beginning and Eliza Graves' husband come to the asylum to liberate her. They are startled to learn that Dr. Edward dismissed her 3 weeks earlier. Men are startled because the professor is Dr. Edward Newgate, the real Dr. Edward. He says the doctor impersonator was his patient. He saw Eliza Graves demonstrate medicine at Oxford. Then he fled a London asylum with Dr. Edward's things and stole his identity. All to save Eliza Graves. Mrs. Graves and Newgate appear in Tuscany towards the film's end. They are now Dr. and Mrs. Lamb. They dance happily and hug in the yard of a nun-run institution. The movie, Stonehurst Asylum, ends there. The explanation follows. Edward was psychologically ill all along. His disease is pseudologia fantastica, or pathological lying. A person constantly lies for no gain. Edward has done this for years. His real name is never revealed. Despite his illness, He is loving and empathetic. His love and understanding for mentally sick people like him helped him help them. Even Eliza's touch phobia is cured by him. Edward can act normally because of this. The audience won't think he's crazy. Edward's character is solid. This film emphasizes love's power. Even a deranged soul can be overcome. For more such videos, subscribe, turn on alerts, and like to support the channel. Thanks for watching.